It was a rainy day, much like this one, actually, and I was riding the bus to work. I made my usual mistake. Maybe it's relatable. I opened up my News Digest to get the headlines before I had my morning cup of coffee. Classic error. The headlines were really something that morning. New variant of COVID-19 spreading. Oi. New findings from the January 6th committee. Another oi. And then you can't make this one up. Earth may be entering a mass extinction event. If that isn't burying the lead, I don't know what is. No amount of coffee could turn that morning around. I imagine that whoever wrote those headlines and put them in that order was keenly aware of that classic joke. What's the difference between a Jewish pessimist and a Jewish optimist? A Jewish pessimist says, things can't possibly get any worse. And the Jewish optimist says, sure they can. We're living in a time of turmoil. You don't need me to tell you that. Our everyday conversations take on existential agita. I mean, you know it's really, really bad when we're turning to the Game of Thrones prequel for escapism. The poet Amanda Gorman sums up the mood of these times perfectly in a recent work. She writes, "Everything hurts. It's a hard time to be alive, and even harder to stay that way. We're burdened to live out these days." I can't pretend that we are entering into a new year bustling with unbridled hope. There are real dangers facing our community, our country, and this world. But there's one danger about which I have grown increasingly concerned as the result of the many conversations that we've shared this year. Despair. Elders tell me that they can't believe this is the world of their twilight years. Couples come questioning the morality of having children, and our youth are racked with anxiety over the state of the world. And while those feelings are warranted, what we do with those feelings matters a great deal. And the turn towards despair, towards despondency, towards fatalism is dangerous. So what should we be doing with our heartbreak? Rabbi Beck provides guidance for these difficult days. Rabbi Beck was the leader of German Jewry before and then during the Holocaust. When the deportations began, he refused to flee to safety. He continued to lead our people while imprisoned in a concentration camp. He managed to survive, and after the war began to once again write and to teach. His work emphasizes an idea that is rooted in the tradition, one which he believed was a key component of Jewish existence and Jewish resilience. Rabbi Beck wrote that in order to face the world and its wickedness, Jews needed Jewish optimism. And that's not a contradiction in terms. But think about what a shocking statement that is, Jewish optimism, from a rabbi who had seen his entire world snuffed out before his eyes. What did he mean by Jewish optimism? Nothing Pollyanna-ish. There is no sentimentality in this optimism, Beck taught. But Jewish optimism begins with the heartbreak that I believe compels Jews to utter our most famous exclamation, "Oi." I mean, we say "oi" when the world rends our heart and falls so terribly short of our expectations. And it's such a rich exclamation, "oi." Try saying it with me. Ready? I'm going to put you to work here. 1, 2, 3. It was okay. They did better last night. We have to practice this because in a moment we're about to do our alphabet of woe and we're going to be going oi, oi, oi over and over again. So let's try one more time if you would. 1, 2, 3. Okay. I mean, when we say oi, we're not just to use our voice. When we say oi, we use our whole bodies, we use our whole beings to express that oi. And it's from the depths of our sense of oi that Beck suggests we locate our optimism. So that means it's good to feel strife. How Jewish is that? I want to be clear, I'm not saying it's good to suffer. But it is good to look out at the world and feel moral embarrassment, to feel outrage even. Karl Marx famously claimed that religion was an opiate used to tranquilize the masses. But boy, did he not know Judaism. Because Judaism does exactly the opposite. Jewish thinkers of all ideologies, Beck, Heschel, Buber, Soloveitchik, all of them say that when we truly study Torah, it will lead us to feel disturbed by our society. The Jewish living is what forces us to feel out of place in a broken world, rather than join the multitudes who adjust themselves to the abominations and the absurdities that occur all around us. But while Judaism is supposed to help us feel strife, modern society is overrun by voices who are seeking to quiet our disquiet. Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz, the giant of Jewish education, cautioned us. He wrote, "Peace of mind has come to be regarded as one of life's highest ideals. Clergy and leaders of cults and psychologists and advertisers all seem to agree that this is the thing most to be desired. But," he writes, "without inward strife, there can be no life." In other words, we must not anesthetize ourselves to the troubling parts of the world. Judaism demands that we see them and that we feel them. So all of you who are geschreien, oi gewollt, exactly. Counterintuitively, that oi is the first step towards Jewish optimism. And that's what makes it different from despair. They both begin with heartbreak, but despair makes us passive, resigned to our fate, adamant that there is nothing to be done. But oi does the opposite. It's a catalyst for action, and because of that, it leads us to Jewish optimism. I know what you're thinking. Rabbi, you've spent half the time convincing us it's okay to feel oi. For this, we needed a sermon. What do we do with our oi? How does it help us muster optimism? Well, the pivot from oi to optimism is in the unique way we could look at the world. Jews in every age have been asked to adopt what I've come to call a God's eye view. You've heard of a bird's eye view. The nods are encouraging. A bird's eye view. Well, a bird's eye view may be enough of a height for some people to overcome their sense of oi, but not Jews. We need to crank that idea up to 11. Jews need a God's eye view. Because when our people's story began, we were called upon to be God's partner in the world. To do that work effectively, to rise up to that summons, we must see the world and our place within it through God's eyes. This unique viewpoint has helped our people in every age move with purpose and even with joy through a broken world. So what do we see from a God's eye view? We see the goal on the horizon. At the root of our faith is the conviction that people and the world change. And because of that conviction, we believe that a day will dawn that will bring about peace, wholeness, perfect tranquility. And that moment, which we sometimes call the Messianic era, sometimes the world to come, sometimes the kingdom of heaven, it lies in the future so long as we work for it. So our God's eye view reminds us that we have a purpose. And remembering that we have a purpose is a powerful antidote to despair. Beck summed it up by saying, despite the prevalence of wickedness, we face the world with the will to change it and with the commandment to realize the good in it. So much is reeling around us. But we are not aimless, and we are not powerless. Our task and our charge remains constant. It is the same as that which Isaiah charged our ancestors when he said, "Prepare the way. Move the world towards that messianic era." Our optimism isn't naively believing that things will just inevitably get better. Rather, we are optimistic because we have identified the outcome we hope for, and we're willing to play an active role in bringing it about. How do we do that? We have to pay attention to the things that evoke our heartbreak. What was the last thing that made you say, "Oi"? That is where your work is. That is where you are called to build a small piece of the Messianic age in our time. Our God's eye view reminds each and every one of us that Judaism demands us to remember that there is a task that we and we alone can perform in this world. That the mission is very much ours, should we choose to accept it. But to be part of Jewish community is to be ready to accept that call. And adopting our God's eye view provides another gift for these difficult days. In addition to reminding us of our purpose, it also gives us perspective. Because when our focus is too narrow, we can mistake momentary setbacks for definitive defeats. A God's eye view asks us to zoom out and remember that our people have marched through most of recorded history, and we expect to march through the rest, working to bring about that messianic age. There are some who look out at the last few years and decide that the losses are so severe, there is no point in continuing the work. I can understand the despair that would lead people to feel that way. Believe me, there have been days where I have felt that futility. But Judaism has no patience for futility. It demands that we look beyond the moment, beyond the scope of a Supreme Court term or an election cycle or even a lifetime. We have become so accustomed to short-term thinking. A God's eye view asks us to recalibrate our sense of long-term. We must begin making decisions with the mindset of moving millennia, not moments. Because the gains we made in the world were the result of generations of our ancestors working through time. And progress was not always linear. We have not always handed the next generation a better world. But that has never stopped us from doing everything we can with the hour that lays before us. Sometimes our lot in life is to be the ones who, alongside today's defeats, plant the seeds for tomorrow's great victories. And we can see this play out in an unlikely place, the ocean. Coral reefs around the world have experienced unparalleled bleaching events that have decimated the ecosystems and all life that depends on them. Coral scientists warned that this was coming as the ocean warmed and grew more acidic, but beginning in 2014, in the span of a mere 3 years, reef ecosystems that lasted millennia, that felt immortal, died swiftly, suddenly. Despair set in. Many scientists declared that all wild coral would be dead by mid-century, by the year 2050. But a few scientists took a God's eye view. Rather than letting despair paralyze them and allowing the defeats of today to become irrevocable, they're pioneering paths to create a future for coral reefs, imagining solutions for the year 2350, not 2050. Their breakthroughs are creating hope, creating optimism where none existed. And it may be that our descendants will be able to swim among vibrant coral thanks to these scientists' dogged pursuits to change the course of centuries, not decades. And this is the perspective we must bring to any issue we care about. Once we are reminded that we have a purpose, a calling, and once we recalibrate the full scope of time in which we are working to fulfill that purpose, then our God's eye view graces us with the most important tool for attaining Jewish optimism: courage. Courage that enables us to do what is right rather than what is popular or easy or self-interested. When our societal systems are overrun by hucksterism and chicanery and meanness, the seductive path is to join in, to be part of the carnival, to say, if you can't beat them, join them. And many take that path. But if we truly take a God's eye view, if we find Jewish optimism, we will be able to resist the temptations to selfishness, the allure of power over principle, and the enslavement of conscience to comfort. Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch laid out the challenge for us beautifully in the 1800s when he said, in the midst of a world where humanity's stated aim is na'aseh lanu shem, to make a name for ourselves, and its ambition is to increase our power and to extend our domain no matter what the cost, the nation of Abraham is to heed one and one call only. Ve'yeh bracha, become a blessing. We know all too well that there are real dangers lurking about us and lying in wait in this year that is ahead of us. Today, fulfilling the call to become a blessing will require deeds of countercultural courage, speaking truth in an age of fraud and falsehood, standing for civility and kindness in an age of violence, acting selflessly in an age of selfishness. We must safeguard civil rights and the rule of law in an age of impunity, and we must be active, proud Jews while anti-Semitism rages around us. It's a difficult list, an overwhelming one. But the beauty of a God's eye view is that it is shared. None of us stand alone. We stand with those who came before us. We stand with those who surround us today, and we stand with those who will take on the mantle of Jewish optimism tomorrow. And together, just like the generations past, we are reaching for that messianic age, knowing that it will require us to find the courage to refuse to see this wilderness that's before our eyes and call it a promised land when there is so much promise yet to be fulfilled. Because that destination will only be built by our deeds. The poem that so captured our angst also captures the promise. Everything hurts. It's a hard time to be alive, and it's even harder to stay that way. We're burdened to live out these days, while at the same time blessed to outlive them. Maybe everything hurts, our hearts shadowed and strange, but only when everything hurts may everything change. May everything change.
ואני תפילתי לך אדוני את רצון ואני תפילתי לך אדוני את רצון אלוהים ברוב חסדך ענני באמת אישך אלוהים ברוב חסדך ענני באמת אישך ואני תפילתי לך אדוני את רצון ואני תפילתי לך אדוני את רצון אלוהים ברוב חסדך ענני באמת אישך אלוהים ברוב חסדך משכנותיך